mark Earth Day in 2016, the Open University of Hong Kong hosted an Earth Day Summit. In the following address, Professor Vivian Wong, chairperson of Friends of the Earth Hong Kong, presents some best practice examples from the so-called C40 cities, a group of megacities taking action to reduce carbon emissions. While showcasing environmental projects and initiatives from around the world, Professor Wong asks the question, how can Hong Kong be a part of this?
Welcome to this very, very important meeting that we have in follow-up of the Paris Agreement. As you see on our theme, we're talking about the post-carbon cities. How do we do it? So in this section, I'm going to give you a run-through of what the C40 cities. It's actually started with C40, but now it's more than 100 cities that has committed to our goal. And it's examples from these cities that would actually tell us how and what we are going to do. So I'm going to talk about this climate positive development. This is a term perhaps is new to you, but I think it's very positive. I'll go through why, what, how, the benefits and barriers. Then I'll use 7 cities to illustrate how it is done in this 20 minutes. In the first ones, I would actually go through quite fast because this is actually numbers you can get. And this is what's set in Paris, but then this is not enough. And how can Hong Kong be part of this? The COP21, the road, and is this 2 degrees centigrade or less above pre-industrial levels. And this is something familiar to you all as well. So why are we doing this? Then perhaps the first message I have in my presentation today is that this is a climate positive movement. From the global perspective that was presented earlier, we talk about this global movement, then we go on to the national policies, because all the heads are in New York currently, and they're going to sign this agreement. That's a national policy. So remember, if we don't have a policy, we citizens can't do anything. So with a national policy, then cities are subnational. It could be in regions. But I think the point about it is we're talking about economy. For all these to develop, it's going to take money, but it's going to be a green economy. We're not saying that we're not going to consume. We are, but we are going to do it differently, and it's going to be beneficial for all. So it affects the local community. When we're talking about development in cities, we are talking about community. But more importantly, as the sustainable consumers, the individual has to be conscious. What next? Reduce carbon emission. That's easy. This actually comes from Bloomberg. The leaders, all right? New York, just now, mention was made about Copenhagen. Low carbon cities. What are they? Why is it important? Because currently about 50% of the world's populations live in cities, and it will become 70%. So if we do not actually do something holistically to plan the cities better, to make it low carbon, compact, and connected, we are not going to achieve our objectives. So the sources of greenhouse gas emission, you know, but in the course of today, we're going to address the 3 main ones: the energy, the waste, and the transportation, to make us truly sustainable and to be net carbon negative. We're talking about negative now. It's actually more than just neutral. And some people can achieve it. So if they can, why not Hong Kong? I think that is the message. Why not us? We are proud of all our technology, all our brains and our innovation, so we must do this. So we need to have the annual credit more than our emission. You can see I've put our zero carbon building in Hong Kong. Why is it there only one? Should all of us, all the buildings be zero carbon? So we have to maximize efficiency. Waste is a resource. This is going to be a major topic for this afternoon. And then offset emissions, renewable energy, I hope we'll touch upon it. The carbon sinks. and cycling, biking, and certainly farming as well. So this is areas that Hong Kong has not really developed too much, all right? So what is it? Under the C40 guidance, they have actually various project contents. So it's actually from energy, waste, transport to off-site, we mentioned. And then you have walk and bikeability. This is obviously a creative term, bikeability. Can we do this? Walkability, can we do this in Hong Kong? Waste is a resource I mentioned. Compact mixed-use development. Hong Kong is small. We always say that we don't have enough land. But can it be compact mixed-use development? This is what we're targeting. But we have to talk about the positive impact in the surrounding community. And therefore, I will give you more of those later. So for the developers, just now, mention was made about the government, but what about the business, the industry? So how do we actually work together? We'll give examples of those, but we have to set a baseline. Where are we now? How do we integrate a systematic approach? And how do we quantify the measurements? There's no point in saying we are doing something without knowing, without measuring whether we are succeeding. So the district-scale projects are divided into 4 stages. The first one is that you apply to C40 cities to become a candidate. Then you become a participant with strategic and tactical roadmaps, measurement, verification, partnership, and setting milestones. Then, along the roadmap, it's important, I emphasize in red there, measurement of emissions. You have to measure the emissions of the various milestones. But more importantly, number 4, verification. All right, you measure, is it correct? So we have to make sure that it is verified and that you have a net operational emission below 0. Then, what are the benefits? Why are we doing this? So with this overall holistic planning and development, I think the citizens, just now we're saying that the individual consciousness. So what are we trying to achieve that would actually make life better? You improve the local environment, the first thing, which makes life happier. Secondly, you create jobs. We need employment. Third, we enhance quality of life. Is this something that our citizens want? Certainly. If that's the case, why not? So we have to maximize the carbon dioxide reduction. We mentioned that already on the climate positive roadmap. We use land use transformation. We'll give you examples of this industrial port land or central located land transformation, and the mixed-use community and new models of sustainability. Renewable energy, this is important, but it's important to talk about this impact of the surrounding community. Examples will be given later. But we have to have a business case. We're talking about economy. We have people in the business, in the industry in the room. How do we make a business case to make it work? To have a win-win situation. But more importantly, we have to plan. We have to lock in actions which would lead us right into the future. We have to plan for our roadmap until 2050. And this is something that is so important for everyone to put our heads together in order to make use of all these new technology before we can do it. And the barriers. What are the barriers? Just now, I think this resounds from this Consumer Council study. The barriers are similar. But then, to us, it is important to talk about regulation and politics. Because if we do not have the government's leadership, it's very difficult for the rest of us to actually proceed. So we talk about the markets, the new business models, but more importantly today, we're starting and to inform our citizens because there's limited awareness and public support. How do we get public support to actually pay more for something that is more sustainable? How do we get the public to pay more, to pay for renewable energy? All right, you say it's more expensive. Is it? But even if it is, are we willing to pay? Yes, we are. So if the public is supportive, then we can together achieve our aim. So how do we future-proof our projects? And that is to say, we have to assess the risk of doing really cutting-edge technology. Again, that relies on the professionals, the innovation in the industry. Now, going back to the second part of the presentation, this is the Climate Positive Development Program that was started. By the way, we have the Green Building Council people here as well. This was actually from the United States, the Clinton Climate Initiative. So the model is that we need a stronger green economic growth. We talk about money. Money is the first thing. Mainstreaming the whole thing is we're talking about a green economic growth. But it would produce significant emission reduction. So that is our target. But it is for the long-term well-being of citizens. Us. We need to be improving our well-being. Otherwise, the citizens will not rally around. But finally, if we want it to be economically sustainable, as far as environmentally sustainable, it has to be cost-effective. So this is the challenge. So I'll give you some climate-positive projects, some of the cities. And this actually comes from the C40 Good Practice Guides. So these are best practice for better outcome in 3 aspects: economic, social, and environment. So this is best practice that people have done, and we are using it as examples for everyone. So we have to set ambitious goals with holistic plans, with policy and regulatory framework, procurement powers, sector plans, and PPP, private-public partnership. So there are 5 different directions, and there are examples for each. The first one, ambitious goals and holistic plans. This comes from Stockholm. I highlight what I believe is the most significant lesson to learn, and they actually engage the public from the beginning. From the beginning of goal setting, they have public platform for discussion, the stakeholder engagement, and aside from the others. So, and this is, SRS stands for Stockholm Royal Seaport. Started 2010, so we're not too late. Only 6 years ago, perhaps we could do something about our various areas which could be developed along the same line. But I think the important point I want to highlight here is that the Swedish government wanted the Stockholm projects to be a pilot. They called it the urban laboratory. This is a model for the long-term aim of zero fossil fuel in Sweden. So could Hong Kong be the Stockholm for China? China has committed at Paris, and there are loads of plans, but it's such a large country, so it's not easy to do. Even cities are much bigger in Hong Kong. So can Hong Kong have experiments like what they have in Stockholm to actually do something such that we'll be together working towards the goal? So in this, they have very aggressive targets, but I want to emphasize the lower part, the dynamic, vibrant living. So that's important. The citizens have to be happy with this vibrant living. So what is it? Is the mixed use. They have apartments, workplaces, and recreation. The 3 together. Just working with no play is no good. So you have to live. So the 3 things are together. And this is the mixed-use compact city that all these models are striving towards. Then we have these points about the smart grid, which I think, again, the engineers were very familiar with. I don't want to go through that. But it's important that in that year, they were elected the first European green capital. So could Hong Kong do the same, maybe 10 years later? If we can do it by 2020, I'll be extremely pleased. What are the important things I want to highlight from their experience? Stringent requirements, comprehensive follow-up processes, capacity development. So that word is very important, the last word, because we have a lot of professionals. But in order to do this, we have to build capacity. So how do we get everyone to work together along the same route and in parallel and working together, coordinated? And then the next one is policy regulatory framework. I think a lot of our governments, civil servants and administrators actually follow the British system. So the question is, if London can do it, why not Hong Kong? All right? So they have a policy regulatory framework. So it's a different thing. It doesn't come from the country. Sweden, it was from the country. It was from London. A London Plan 2002. That was a long time ago. They have one for the whole of London. But then this project is actually targeted to Elephant and Castle. But importantly, it is because as they have an aspiration for jobs, housing, safety, transport, education, shopping, and health, etc. So this is important because we need to engage the people yet again. And for this, there is a roadmap of the progression, and then with a very ambitious target. And this is called the Elephant Park, the climate positive roadmap in London. And then the master plan for energy reduction, it's important that they implement everything on site. But then, afterwards, when they have the combined heat and power system, they expand it to influence the surroundings, so the neighbors. And they have a flexible plan so that it could be built in for future development. And the strategic goals is there. They exceed the local policies. You see, even if the government has some policies, if they're not good enough, they empower. The regulatory framework is a framework only, it's not cast in stone. So in UK, that's done. So the government gives you a policy framework, and then subsequently, within that, you could do more. So you could achieve 30% carbon reduction more. And then I think I like to highlight 100% of the homes were actually built with FSC timber. So that is good. Have we ever thought about that at all in Hong Kong? And then extensive biodiversity strategy. So would that be something that we should consider even as a pilot in some new developments? And then it's important in here, they highlighted, they work together with a developer, but it is a visionary developer. For the people who are in the room, who are developers, business people, you have to be visionary. And then you could work together with us in order to drive this innovation. And it is ambition and innovation. The third one, procurement power. The model from Sydney is different. The government actually engaging, commissioning a commercial company to do it. So it is in New South Wales. And in fact, I don't know whether you have noticed, the company, Land Lease, was the same one that London used, but it is in a different business model. So the Elephant and Castle one was also Land Lease, and then in Sydney, they selected this to transform. And this is Barangaroo South, and you can see that in the picture. They talk about water positive. Do you know what that means? I really don't. So you have to go and find out. Zero waste, you know. Carbon neutral, you know. And then, importantly, we mentioned community well-being. We have to make the people happy before the thing could be successful. So the master plan and goal, carbon reduction strategy, on and off-site. Now, this is more than the previous one because it was just on-site, right? So it's on and off-site. And they talk about carbon offsets. And then to talk about transport strategy. This is something that I want to highlight because, again, this is a concept so foreign to Hong Kong and China. They have to reduce the total work-related trips by car to the site to 4%. Not by 4%, to 4%. That means to say, just in 2 years' time, only 4% of people drive to work. All right? Is that possible for people in Central? Should we be targeting that? I know we have very good MTRs in public transport. So in fact, perhaps that could be zero. Maybe perhaps if it's actually disabled-friendly transportation, is that something too ambitious? And then we have to encourage them to have other green traffic options. And this is actually some of those. Then 99% of the construction waste is recycled. Where are our recyclers in the room? Can we recycle 99%? And then they have innovative green leases. This is something I think our Bureau Chief, K.S. Wong, is very keen about. Can we do that in Hong Kong? How do we do these innovative green leases? Reason for success is that you set a high bar. You have to aim high, and then we have to have a climate positive requirement for the competitive bidding. See, this is a model that Hong Kong could emulate because we have large projects and we ask developers to bid. But you have to put into specifications all the requirements that we want. And that is the climate positive requirement. The fourth one is PPP. This is actually an example from India. So it is a greenfield, fast-growing development, and they develop infrastructure at scale. And it's from 2007 to 2015. You can see that it is ambitious, but yet it is achieved. And they actually have now passed the C40 cities gateway. As far as the impact reduction, is more than 80% of the total emission. So that's ambitious. And vertical, horizontal, and solar. Horizontal means the utilities, and the vertical means the buildings. And the waste impact, again, I highlighted in red down there. The rest you know, is they have 78%. That's not dissimilar from major cities like Hong Kong of MSW. Avoid, shift, and improve. Avoid, you know. Improve, I guess you know. But the shifting is important. This is something that in Hong Kong we are not very good at. And I think this is where we could work together to shift our ideas as to how we could shift from motorized transport to walking, biking, and so forth. And this is another thing that would be touched upon. More than 50% of rooftops dedicated to solar. Reason for success: think creatively and leveraging additional investment opportunities. And in the United States, Oberlin, this is interesting. It's actually a sector, education sector. The city in the United States and the college, they joined together to make renewable energy resource and improve economy, and also the sustainable use of local resources. And then they have an industry, the local food economy, to meet 70% of their consumption, and integrate sustainability into education at all levels, and 1/3 acre green arts district. Denmark, this is something that I want to emphasize. They actually planned from the year 2010 to 2029. That is to say, how they're going to achieve their carbon reduction to zero carbon. This is a roadmap in which we should all strive to get, right? So should Hong Kong be doing this? We haven't actually started, so we should plan. So they have a zero project, and zero family, zero home, and so forth. Finally, Melbourne, besides the Trigen, the small prints you may not be able to see very well, but you can see, what can I do right now? So this is trying to get the citizens to be involved, all the things that they need to do. Finally, quoting Leonardo DiCaprio, let us not take this planet for granted. And certainly we should not take it today for granted. Thank you.
In the next presentation, Dr. Jeffrey Hung, Head of Policy and Research at Friends of the Earth Hong Kong, explores the topic of climate change adaptation in coastal delta cities. In the face of changing weather patterns, coastal delta cities such as Hong Kong are particularly vulnerable to rising sea levels and flooding. Dr. Hung discusses the measures that can be taken to build resilience to long-term environmental threats.
Thanks all for coming, and good morning everyone. So I will spend around 20 minutes to talk about the climate change adaptations in the delta cities. So before I go into the details, I will show you some background information. So for delta cities, actually more than 2/3 of the world's cities are in the coastal delta cities. For example, Singapore and Tokyo, and for sure Hong Kong as well. And the coastal cities are very sensitive to the sea level rise and also changes in both the frequency and intensity of the storms, and also precipitation and warmer ocean temperatures. You can see from this figure, is from IPCC. You can see from 1901 to 1990, and the average global sea level has been rising by 1.5 millimeter annually. And the situation is getting more serious, and in 1993 to 2010, and it's rising by 3.2 millimeters. So IPCC has also done some predictions up to 2100, and you can see from this figure, the red band is the highest emission scenario, And the global mean sea level will rise up to 1 meter by the end of this century. And it's very serious because lots of the low-lying areas will be maybe flooded and then disappear. So the climate change will also increase the frequency and intensity of extreme weathers. For example, according to the World Meteorological Organizations, and then they classified 2015. It's the warmest years globally since the record since 1850. And then you can see from this figure from NOAA from United States, from 1950 to 2015, the temperature has keep rising and then reached the maximum high at 2015. So climate change will also increase the frequency and intensity of many other extreme weathers, same as in Hong Kong in 2015. We are a record-breaking year for Hong Kong for the high temperatures. As you all know, that's the mean temperature in summer, both summer and autumn. This is ranked highest since we have record from 1884. And as I'm sure you all still remember, on the August 8th, we have the maximum temperature reach 36.3 degrees Celsius. And also it will increase the frequency and intensity of the storm surges, and the storm surges will cause flooding in low-lying areas and will cause damages to the property, to the transportation systems, habitats, and also even threaten to the human lives. And also will bring heavier rainfalls and leading to the increasing runoff and the flooding. And you can see from the left picture, is around on 18th of April, is in Houston. There's a heavy raining events, and the government has issued a flash flood emergency on that day. And the right picture is just a few days ago in Hong Kong. It's a heavy rain in the morning, and then we have a flooding in the Kowloon area, in Cheung Sha. So actually, rich countries are the most vulnerable to rising sea level, and the Climate Central has published a report, and they identify the most vulnerable countries like China, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and then you can look at these figures. So if the temperatures rise to 2 degrees Celsius, in China, around 64 million people will be affected. And if they're getting more serious for 4 degrees Celsius, then more than 145 million people will be affected. And even in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Observatory has predicted that if the climate trends continues, and by the end of the century, the temperature will rise to around 3 to 6 degrees Celsius, and the sea level may rise up to 3 meters. And some low-lying area in Hong Kong, for example, the Tai O, will be flooded. So for the climate adaptations in Delta cities, actually the C40 cities has formed a network. It's called Connecting Delta Cities Network, and they want to share the challenges, policies, information research, technologies, and some financial partnerships. They aim to develop solutions for the adaptations. So ultimately, is want to prevent the damage. This good practice guide offers the policymakers some roadmaps, ideas, how to tackle the climate change and reduce the risks, and so towards a sustainable urban development. Actually, they covers lots of different aspects like buildings, energy, transportations, and more. So climate change adaptation aims to build the resilience to long-term threats and risks, and many studies show that the adaptation measures, such as the land use planning, climate-proof measures, are very cost-effective than uncoordinated response. For example, in Copenhagen, they have implemented a cloudburst management plan, and they spend around US dollar 575 million. But after calculations, and they show that even one single cloudburst event in 2011, it costs more. So the adaptation measure is very important, and it's very cost-effective. So actually, there are 5 major adaptation solutions for the sea level rise, storm surge, and flooding. The first one is the pumping, piping, and the storage. And this infrastructure, together with the drainage systems, are the key technologies in protecting the urban area from flooding. For example, in Jakarta, this city will suffer from land subsidence, and so that they need to pump the water to the natural watercourse before it's discharged into the sea. So in Hong Kong, we have also some similar structures. In a Sheung Wan storm water pumping station, we direct the runoff from the low-lying areas to the pumping stations, and then the pumping station will through the pipelines and then pump away and then towards the sea. The second solution is the sea walls and water barriers. So it includes the artificial seawall, for example, the levees, and some temporary storm surge barriers. And for the developments of the sea walls, we have to consider altogether the historical and current flood trends, the future sea level rise, and also the frequency of the extreme weathers. For example, in Tokyo, they have built lots of the super levees. You can see from this picture. It's different from the traditional one, is that they are wider and have a more shallow slope, because it's now the urban development on the top and as well as the public access to riversides for the recreational purposes. The third one is the green buoy infrastructures. They use the natural features, for example, the vegetation and soil, to retain the water within the city, and as well it provides some environmental and community benefits. And also it helps to reduce the coastal widths. For example, the beaches can strengthen the coastal barriers, and the mangroves and wetlands can act as a buffer between the sea and the urban areas. For example, in Rotterdam, Water Plaza, you can see from these figures, this plaza serve as a public urban zone during the dry periods, but can act as a water catchment system during the heavy rain events. The fourth solution is the flood proofing. Actually, there are two main types of flood proofing. The first one is the flood resilience, like the top pictures. They elevated the buildings so that it can adapt to sea level rise and flooding. And then the second measures is a dry and flood resistant. For example, they make the building watertight to up to expected height so that no water can get in. So apart from these two measures, in the city scale one is, for example, the drainage system, the bows well, and green roofs. You can see that in this picture is the bows well in the car park. So makes use of the vegetation and the soil to retain the water within the city, and then to enhance the hydrological cycle as well. So the fifth solution is a more high-level one, it's an organizational approach. So it includes 5 elements. This is establish a central coordinating body to have a long-term planning, mainstreaming, and promote the public awareness, and then identify the problems, and then for NGOs to share the responsibilities. And then also the last one is to establish the redundancy. It's very important because we need to create some spare capacity to enable some safe disruptions. Actually, the C40 cities has also identified 7 complementary management approaches for the climate change adaptations. So I will go through one by one with some case studies. So the first one is to take an integrated and then use water system approach. Actually, it's very important for the entire city and the system in relation to the natural topography and then the water course. For example, the case study in Rotterdam, as I mentioned before, they implement a climate change adaptation strategies, and they built like this picture is a museum park car park. They have underground water storage up to a capacity of 10,000 cubic meters. And also they have some blue-green corridors to enhance the hydrological cycles. So in 2014 alone, the Rotterdam installed more than 185 square meters of green roofs. And the second one is engage community and stakeholders in coastal and riverside land use. As it's very important requirements that adaptation is to assess how climate change will affect the citizens in the coastal areas. So in a case in Jakarta, there's implement a urban revitalization project, and they spend $1.3 billion to relocate the illegal squatters from the riverside. And they target to relocate them to the government housings. Third one is to manage the rainwater. To prevent flooding. It's very important for low-lying areas. There are some traditional approaches like drainage systems, pipes and pumps. And then the case study in Copenhagen, just I mentioned before, a cloudburst management plan. And in addition to this, they have implemented sustainable urban drainage systems. This is such as the green gardens, rooftops, to retain the water and prevent them directly flowing to the sea. So actually in Hong Kong, we have similar infrastructures, the Happy Valley underground stormwater storage, and we have storage tanks beneath under the sport grounds and with a capacity of 60,000 cubic meters. Actually, half is commissioned in 2015. And the fourth one is to manage the groundwater table. Because actually in many delta cities, the ground is very soft and not static, and then land subsidence may occur. And the situation will be more serious if the water being pumped out from the groundwater table. So there's case study in US, in New Orleans. They have implemented an urban water plan. And you can see from this picture, they construct some porous pavement, and so underneath is the soil, so you can replenish the groundwater and limit the runoff. So the fifth one is to consider the water balance. This is freshwater supply. Actually, apart from the flooding, we are prone to many other threats, such as heat, droughts, water scarcity. There's case study in Singapore. They develop different reservoirs, and they make them to increase the water catchment from half to 2/3 of the total Singapore land areas in 2011. And also, they due to the advancement in membrane technology, they treat the water catchment to drinking water. And then actually, those water are comply with the WHO drinking water standards. And the Singapore case is quite similar to Hong Kong, because both cities are lacking the freshwater resources. So in Hong Kong, I'm sure all you know that more than 70% of our freshwater resources are from China, from Dongjiang. So, but indeed, in fact, you all may not know that there are half of the cities in China, that's around more than 600 cities in China, are under water scarcity. So Hong Kong really need to increase our local catchment. So the sixth approach is adopt a multi-risk approach. The climate change adaptation need to be prioritized. For example, this case I mentioned before, the Tokyo have built super levees. They are associated and addressed with other risks. For example, they are resistant to the earthquakes and tsunamis events. The last one is utilize priority budgeting, because many cities are facing the tight budgets and high maintenance costs and operational costs. So we need to prioritize the budget and explore some innovative solutions. So in New York, they have implemented a mitigation banking program. The story is that in 2012, the wetland in the West Shores has mitigated severe flooding caused by hurricane events. It's called Sandy. But unfortunately, the wetland is under degradations. But the wetland is very important as a resilient buffers for the coastal communities. So New York City therefore implement this banking program called Marshes. They utilize the Federal Recovery Fund to restore the wetland, as well as to improve the resilience measures. So how about Hong Kong? Actually, Hong Kong has published a climate change report in 2005 in November. And they also have some predictions of the climate conditions in 21st century. There's a previous speakers have also mentioned we will increase temperatures and sea level rise, as well as we will have under threats to the storm surge and tropical cyclones. And also they have identified some major impacts, including biodiversity, physical infrastructure, business, financial service, food, human health, and water resources. So annual mean sea level in Hong Kong, you can look at the dotted line, and the prediction will arrive 1 meter by the end of this century. Actually, Hong Kong has done some adaptation measures, both existing one and planning one. For example, they involve revitalization of the water body, they will improve the drainage, and then the DSD also investigating the blue-green infrastructures. And also a mangrove management plan has been adopted to reduce flooding and also protect the habitats. What Hong Kong government needs to do is that we need a multidisciplinary collaboration among different government departments, and also together with the NGOs and the professionals. And also we have to learn from overseas experience, because to develop a holistic plan for the adaptation measures. So I finished my adaptation part here, but how about mitigations? Mitigation actually is the most important part, because it's actually the greenhouse gas reduction measures. So I will leave it to other speakers to talk about this. Thank you very much.